Hello and welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. My name is Alice Morrison and I live in Morocco in the Atlas Mountains, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my life here and some of my adventures because I am an adventurer by trade. So let us begin. Can Maya can. Once upon a time there was a girl called Alice Morrison, and she decided to run the hardest ultramarathon on earth, the Marathon des Sables, which is 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara Desert. There was only a couple of problems. She was living in the Peak District of England where it rains all the time and it's very cold. Nothing like the Sahara. And secondly, she's a very, very bad runner. I'm a terrible runner. So I decided to make this Marathon des Sables a big thing in my life and to move to Marrakech to train. So on a cold winter's day on the 2nd of January, I packed up all my clothes, my running kit, a few little treats from home like a hot water bottle, which came in very handy, and I moved to Marrakech. And little did I know that that was the first step on a journey that was to mean that I would live in Morocco for 6 years and come to fall in love with the whole country. I'm very greedy. I didn't fall in love with just one man with a pair of flashing dark eyes. I fell in love with the whole country. So I arrived in Marrakech in the middle of winter, and I soon realized one thing about Marrakech, that the men are very, very romantic. And although I'm a woman in my 50s, I found that I was being called all sorts of names in the street that I'm not quite sure fitted, but they certainly made me laugh. Ya Ghazal, oh gazelle, someone would say. Somebody else would say, oh, magnifique, you are magnificent. And this used to make me chortle. And then really for me, the epitome of the romantic nature of your average Moroccan male came to the fore on one of my very first taxi rides in Marrakech. So in Marrakech, the system is that you share a taxi. So when you see one going past, the little yellow taxi with its light on, you flag it, they stop, in you get, and they press the counter. So I got into my taxi, and my taxi driver was a gentleman who had only one tooth, right in the middle of his mouth. He was kind of bald, and he was wearing a striped shirt, and had a slightly shaved head. So anyway, we get chatting, and this is how it goes. Salam alaikum. Wa alaikum salam. Peace be upon you be peace. And then he said, how are you? And I said, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? I'm fine, thank you. How's the family? Oh, thank you for asking. The family is very, very well. And you, how's your family? Oh, my family also, they're doing so well. Thank you very much. How's your health? My health is excellent. Thank you very much. By now you'll have realized that greetings in Morocco are a long and complicated process. So we go on. How is your health? My health is excellent, thank you. And you? Oh, it's very, very good. And what about the weather in Marrakech at the moment? It's great. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. Indeed it is, said my lovely taxi driver. He said it's very good because in the summer, we taxi drivers, we get very hot. The sun's coming in through the window all day, and it's especially bad in Ramadan when we're fasting. So I commiserated with him at some length about life as a taxi driver. And then we got on to, by then we'd been together for about 10 minutes, so we felt we really knew each other. So then we exchanged names, and he was like, excuse me, Lalla, which means auntie or madam, or it's a nice word. It's for an older lady, a bit rude, but it's a lovely word. So he said, excuse me, Lalla. I said, yes. He said, what's your name? I said, my name is Alice. What's your name? And he said, my name is Mustafa. And I said, oh, I'm honored to meet you, Mustafa. I'm honored. And he said, the honor is all mine. And by then, we were really clicking. So then Mustafa said, are you married? And I said, no, I've never been married. And he went, oh. Of course, in this culture, being a woman and not being married is odd, to say the least. And it shows some kind of failure. So I have to always explain this, and it's something I've got used to. But I said, well, Mustafa, no. I'm not married because you men are all mashakil. Mashakil means problems. And he went, oh, no, we're not. We're lovely. And I said, no, men are problems. I'm very happy to be free. And he said, but why? He said, you're so nice. He said, you're so pretty. He said, by which time my ego was swelling. My head was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. He said, you're so nice. He said, don't worry, I know. He said, I'll marry you. And I said, well, Mustafa, we don't know each other very well, but thank you very much indeed for that kind invitation. I may take you up on it. And then he paused for breath and said one thing, and I waited. I didn't quite know what was coming. He said, are you a virgin? And I said, without hesitation, consigning to the past a long and enjoyable youth, I said, of course I am. I'm not married. At which point he said, thanks be to God, alhamdulillah, in which case we can get married. I'm going to give you my phone number. You call me up and we'll arrange it. So at the end of the taxi journey, as I was getting out, he said, don't forget, here, stop, take my phone number. He said, don't forget, I have a taxi. So there you go. My first introduction to the romantic Moroccan man. One of the things I love about Marrakech is it's really a party town. So people come from all over Morocco as well as from abroad to really enjoy the kind of the sights, the sounds, to go out to the clubs, to go out to the coffee shops, to go out to the juice bars, or even just to sit in a family in the middle of the main boulevard and eat tagine at night when you can smell the orange blossom and you can hear the sounds of all the little motos driving past. It's a very, very beautiful city. And one of the things I like as well is that people know how to dress up. It took me some time to understand that in Morocco, and in Marrakech especially, what we would call indoor wear is in fact outdoor wear. So at this time, I was sharing my flat in Marrakech with two lovely girls, with Olivia and Serena, both from the US of A. And we've been having a really good time. They were much younger than me. They were probably, if I had a daughter, they'd be my daughter's age, which always caused some hilarity when people said, are you their mother? They would go, oh, no, she's just a friend. And of course, I was actually very, very complimented because they're beautiful women. So one day we decided to take the bull by the horns and join in the Marrakech fashion parade. So the three of us got out our best, our finest, our fluffiest, our spangliest pajamas. Serena was decked out in blue, turquoise blue and a leopard skin print fluffy fleece. Olivia looked gorgeous in a kind of a pinky red with some orange flashes. And I went full metal Miss Kitty. So I had on tartan fleecy trousers and a tartan pajama top, bright red, with Miss Kitty in a heart on my chest. So dressed up in our finery, we took to the streets of Marrakech. And of course, you know, for us, the girls are from America, Serena's from New York. You would never go out in your pajamas. So we thought this was very funny. And we started off, we thought, we're going to hit the town big. We're going to go to Starbucks in Gillies. So off we trotted to Starbucks. And we joined the queue, the three of us, quite conspicuous in our pajamas. And when we got to the front of the queue, the girl who was serving, who's a very chic girl, a Moroccan girl, she said, wow, you guys are really taking the town by storm. I'm glad to see you've adopted Moroccan fashion. So we knew we were onto a good thing. Then, once we'd had our coffees, off we went and hailed a taxi. And again, taxis seemed to rule my life. We got into the taxi and the taxi driver said, oh, you three look so beautiful. And we said, yes, do you like our pajamas? He went, not only are they practical and cozy, they are glamorous. So off we went into Jemaa el-Fnaa, the main square of Marrakech, where you find the people with the monkeys and the snakes and all the stall holders, and it's full of noise and bustle. It's full of smells from the cooking. And we stopped off first to have a fresh orange juice. And once again, we actually got given a free fresh orange juice, which never, ever, ever happens, because we were definitely the chicest girls there. Some Moroccans stopped and took our photographs. Yes, we had arrived. And the whole day was one of just glory. And those fluffy pajamas, they may have looked naff, but we felt glorious in them. And to finish it off, we decided to ride a horse and carriage back home. So the three of us, clad in Miss Kitty, in turquoise and leopard skin, and in shades of pink and orange, rode in an open horse-drawn carriage all the way back to our house, waving like the Queen. And my third tale, my last tale from Marrakech, also has animals in it. And this one is about the Catman. So I have a running friend called Linda, and she owns a riad called Riad Linda right in the centre of the Medina. So she's just behind Jebel Fana. So although I was further up, what we would do is we would run, and one day we would run at my place and one day we would run at her place. And what I loved about running at her place was that we were right in the centre of the bustling city, opposite Jebel Fana, in fact. So we would arrange to meet there, and every morning, because it gets so hot, we'd arrive very, very early, just after dawn. So sometimes we'd still have a bit of a pink streak of sunrise, and we'd meet outside the Koutoubia Mosque. Now the Koutoubia is the highest mosque in Marrakech. It's the most famous one, and it's very, very beautiful. And it's a big square construct, a rectangle with a minaret on top, and then there are always flocks of birds around it, flocks of pigeons. So sometimes you'd arrive, and as you'd arrive, you'd scatter the pigeons and they'd all fly up. The pigeons and doves would fly past the minaret, framed by the palm trees. Every day when we got there, we would see a man who would be at the same time as us. He must have been going to work, commuting to work on his bicycle. And in his pannier, in his front pannier, he had his dog, which is very unusual in Marrakech because not everyone here likes dogs. Dogs have got rabies. And culturally, dogs are not popular. They're considered to be dirty. However, this man obviously loved his dog, and every day he would cycle past in his striped jalaba with his little dog in his pannier. So that's how we would start our run. Then off we would go. Both of us are from Edinburgh. We'd chug along, we'd put the world to rights, chatting. And our run started off, we went around the back of the Koutoubia, we went up one of the big, wide French boulevards flanked on each side by shops and cafes and restaurants. We'd go down one street that had all along the middle were orange trees, and in spring, the smell of orange blossom hits you like a hammer of gloriousness. So there we are, running along, past the National Theatre on one side, past the beautiful station on the other side. We turn left, go up towards the olive trees, and then to the big supermarket on one side. On the other side, this is what we love about Marrakech, there's all the contrasts. On the other side are the camels waiting for the tourists. And at the time we were running, of course, they're being fed, so they're having their breakfast, they're looking very happy. Then we turn left again, run down another wide boulevard past a little park, and sometimes there'd be a gentleman there who's probably in his late 60s, early 70s, and he'd be doing PE. And he always had a couple of barbells, and he'd be there in his shorts and his shirt pushing up his bells, and if we saw him, he'd make us stop every time and just give us a go. He'd be like, how fit are you? We'd be like panting to keep up with him. He's very, very fit. And then, thank goodness, it's coming towards the end of our run because I'm always exhausted. So we're running along past the beautiful Mamounia Hotel where Churchill's paintings and sketches still are hanging in the foyer, and the gardens are exquisite, again through some more orange trees, orange blossom, up the back of the Mamounia, up the very back of the Mamounia, into the back of Jebel Fana, and there we are. We're just behind the Koutoubia, and there is a pomegranate stand. And the lovely stall holder there sells pomegranate and orange juice. And of course, once you've done a run, there's nothing better for you than a glass of pomegranate juice. He has a cart. On each side, he has a picture of the king, and he has some beautiful fake flowers framing them, and he's very, very proud of it, and he's very nationalistic. So every time I wanted to take a picture of him, he would hold up his picture of the king beside him, and we'd sit there. So glass of pomegranate juice, he'd use his press the pomegranates, and you'd get this glass of crimson red purpley liquid, just full of delicious sugar. Glug, 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 glug it down. And then the last tiny bit of our run would just take us take us down the side of the Koutoubia. And one day we're doing this as usual, and we noticed something very, very strange. Dozens of cats and dogs started running towards us, all together. like a huge family of cats and dogs, maybe, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 animals in all, and they're running directly towards us. And the dogs had their little tails wagging like this, and the cats were running with their tails up, all excited, and they're all running, and they ran straight past us and down to the left into where there were some box hedges and some low walls. So, I mean, you couldn't resist. We followed behind to see what was happening. And there we saw something which gladdened my heart, because I have a cat and I love cats. And there was one of the traditional water cellars. Now, the water cellars in Marrakech, they used to be a very practical, useful part of the city, because they sold water in goatskin bags to thirsty travellers with little silver cups. And they're always incredibly brightly dressed. They have these huge red hats with lots and lots of spangles and pom-poms on them. And they usually wear a red jalaba, and they've got lots of jangly, tingly bits, and they might beat a drum or a tambourine to get attention, or a bell. And they have these big goatskin bags full of water. And now really they make their money by having their photo taken with travellers and visitors. But in the olden days, you could have a drink from them. So one of these men, all dressed very beautifully in his traditional clothing, was walking, and by then all the animals were following behind him like the Pied Piper. So the animals were trotting along behind him like this. And he took out a big sack of fish guts and fish heads and bits of liver and every single scrap of meat and fish you can imagine, and spread them out for the cats and dogs. And afterwards we talked to him, he said that he loved animals and that he knew that they were hungry. So every single day before he started his shift for the tourists in the square, he would come out to feed the cats and dogs. And I hope that gives you a little flavour of the people and the city of Marrakech. And now let's move on to the second part of my story, which is about the Atlas Mountains, which is where I live now. So follow me, come with me now through my house, because I have something lovely to show you. Here we are. So I decided to move to the Atlas Mountains because I signed up for yet another race, and this was the Everest Trail Race. And as you can imagine, what you really need if you're going to run around Everest is to train in the mountains. And I think you'll see that I found the ideal place. So I am lucky enough to live here. This behind me is the village of Imlil, looking out onto the mountains, many of which are above 3,000 meters high. And my own house is perched overlooking a sea of walnut trees and a river valley. And the walnut trees are just starting to come into bud. And as you can see, we still have snow on our beautiful mountains. So coming to Imlil, I had some reservations about coming here, and as you can imagine, one of the big ones was fitting into a very small community, a very traditional community, after being in a big cosmopolitan city like Marrakech. But I managed to find my little flat where you see me now, in a family compound, and finally my day to move came. Now, what is your big concern when you're moving house? What would you say you worry about the most? Think about it while I put my camera down here so I can be comfortable. So what do you worry about when you're moving house? Getting everything cleaned up, making sure you've paid all the bills, making sure that you've booked a delivery man, that you're ready, that you've got everything you need to start off with, all of those things. My main concern when I moved house was how was I going to get my washing machine, under that box there, up this mountain down there. I love my washing machine, I do a lot of sports, I need it, and that was my main concern. That gave me sleepless nights. But fortunately, help was at hand, because what I soon came to realise, in fact, I realised the minute I got here, was that everything in this area is a community affair. So I arrived with a huge truck loaded with everything I own. Beds, sofas, cooking equipment, fridge, 2 bicycles and the washing machine. And I'd called ahead to my friend, who's a guide here, Brahim, and said, can you help me with everything I have to do? And he said, Alice, don't worry, leave it with me. You just sit back and relax. Now, of course, there is another cultural difference here, which is actually works hugely in my favor, which is that men and women have very different roles. So normally something like moving house would really be the husband's job. And since I don't have anyone, I was really lucky because everybody stepped in and suddenly I had about 12 husbands. So I arrived with this huge truck and we parked down at the bottom of the hill. Now I live up a mule track, so you have to basically bring your mule or yourself up this very, very, very steep mountain to the front gate of our compound with all this stuff. And fortunately, I'd booked a couple of mules. So the big debate was, where do we put the washing machine on a mule or not? Again, I just did not need to worry. My friend had organised half of the village to come and help me. So when I arrived, this group of about 12 men appeared. And to save face, I thought, I'll have to carry something. So, you know, I took a quite a heavy box and I was struggling up the hill and I managed to get up to the top. So like panting because we're at altitude and I wasn't used to it. So I was like, this heavy box. I got up to the top and the men just looked at me and I was taken aside and they said, you go down to the village and have some tea and we'll sort everything out. And my last image was of my washing machine being loaded onto one of the mules. And Imran, who I later found out is 8 years old, staggering under an ironing board and a big bag of shoes and bringing them all up here. So that was my moving in. And then I arrived back in the house. And the great thing is people don't just leave you to your own devices. I'm going to show you some more of those mountains. People don't just leave you to your own devices. Oh no. So in came everybody. All these people I'd never met. They all came in. They said, have you had some tea? I said, yes. And then they all unpacked all my stuff, put all my rugs on the ground, arranged my furniture, started putting they said, where do you want the pictures? So I had to make immediate decisions about everything. And then Imran came rushing in. Imran is now one of my friends. And he said, Alice, have you seen? Have you seen? I was like, what? He pressed the light switch. And not only do I have a lovely flat, but I have my very own disco lights, because in the sitting room, the lights around the side of the room are pink and blue. So that was my introduction to living here. But I knew that if I wanted to make friends and live here in the community, I'd really have to make an effort because, you know, obviously my lifestyle is very, very different from that of a normal woman in this place. And I did worry about fitting in because the things I do big adventures, I write, I broadcast. Those I think are brilliant and I'm proud of myself and happy to do them. But for the women here, the most important thing is to have a husband, to have a family, to be a really good housekeeper, to be a good cook, to look after everyone and to be a good person. And really, I fail on many of those things. I hope I'm a good person, but those are not my primary things. I don't have a husband and children. I'm a very bad housekeeper. I'm a reasonable cook. So it was all about finding common ground, and someone really helped me with that. And this is someone who became very dear to my heart, and that was the Hajja. So she was my landlady's, and I say was because very sadly she died last year and we all miss her. She was my landlord's mum, and she's 90. And she came up to about here on me. She's absolutely tiny and always impeccably dressed. She'd be wearing a lovely long skirt and top, an apron, which is normal here, and of course her foulard, her headscarf, and always in different colours and with flowers. She always looked so pretty. And she took a shine to me, and I have to say that was so reciprocated. So every single day I'd hear a little on the door, and there she'd be, and she was so small and she's quite frail, so we'd help her into the house and she'd come in. Now at that stage I didn't speak any Tashlahit. I could only say, which is the local language here, I could only say Maman Kadgit, which means how are you, Ishwa Tshwit, which means it's beautiful, you're beautiful. So that was really my limit, and she made it her job to start teaching me the language so that I could talk to the women. And so we didn't really have a language in common, but we had an understanding. And that's one of the lovely things about people, is when you have an understanding, you can communicate even if your language is small. And one day particularly stays in my mind. We came onto this terrace and we were sitting looking at this view. and the sun was shining, and she went "Verzicht," and I didn't know what it meant. I was like, but I just smiled and said yes. And she took my hand and held my hand in her warm hand, and she said "Verzicht." And later I came to understand what that meant was, are you comfortable? Because I'm comfortable, I'm happy, I'm content with all my surroundings. And every day she would come in, sit, hold my hand and say "Verzicht." The second strand to my becoming accepted within this community, the first strand was definitely the Hajja, because once I had her stamp of approval, things were a bit easier. But the second one was the children. Now, as I said, I'd come to train for this Everest race. And so again, this was culturally, it meant I had to put on my running kit. Now, not shorts, because that really wouldn't work here, but leggings and a t-shirt. And I'd be going out into the mountains and coming back so red and sweaty and exhausted. And they must have just thought I was crazy. But one day I decided, right, one of the things I had to do was weighted step-ups. So I had to put a big weight, some of these, into my backpack. And then I had to step up onto a high step. Now, these steps behind me are not actually high enough. And the only step that is high enough is outside the front door. So I was in such a quandary. So I thought, right, my coach has told me I have to do this. This race is coming up. It's the most difficult race. I have to run for 6 days around Everest at altitude. It's going to be, I climb so much, it's the equivalent of climbing a 10-mile ladder straight up in 6 days. I've got to do this. I've got to do my training. So I got up early-ish in the morning and I thought, I'm just going to have to overcome my embarrassment. And I went outside, put my weight into my rucksack, or my weights into my rucksack, had a piece of paper so I could mark my 500 step-ups. And I was so embarrassed. I felt like such an idiot, really. And anyway, I thought, all right, just do it. So I started. So I'm like, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'd not got to 10 when suddenly children started arriving from every corner. And they just joined in. And then the Hajja came, and bless her heart, she joined in at the lower end of the step. And then 2 of the mothers came and they joined in. And we all did this. And then everyone was shouting, Wahed, Zhouj, Tleta, Arba, 1, 2, 3, 4, as the whole compound, all the women and children in the compound joined me to do my training. And after that, the ice was firmly broken, especially when I brought out my store of lollipops to reward everybody. And the Hajja was the first one in there to grab one. So I quickly came to feel part of this community and to really love the people here, because they're so kind to me and they're so friendly and so funny, and it's easy. They're good neighbours. We have a good time together and we all live together. So it's important. I live above the cow as well, which can get a bit smelly in summer. But really, I think the time when I really felt that I'd entered more deeply into Moroccan life and Moroccan society was last spring, summer, when it was Ramadan. And before, I'm a Christian, so I don't fast, but Muslims all fast between the hours of about 5 o'clock in the morning and 20 to 8 in the evening. And not only do you fast for food, you cannot let anything pass your lips. So you can't smoke, you can't swallow your spit, you can't take medicine, you can't drink. And it's very difficult, actually. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I'd done it for a day or 2 days before, but I'd never done the whole month. But I realized that living here in this small space, it was important that I enjoy the month of Ramadan in the same way as my neighbors and my friends. So I fasted, and it's very interesting how something quite difficult brings you all together. And that whole month for me was difficult, terrible headaches and thirst, but suffering with the community together, especially when it's a suffering, but it's also a offering. You're doing it voluntarily and you're offering something. and we were all together. So every day, we'd all go out in the morning, go, hello, how are you feeling? Oh, a bit thirsty. Then it would come to about 3 o'clock, everyone would go, how's it going? I'd go, oh, I'm so thirsty. I'm so hungry as well, because surprisingly, I felt hungry as well as thirsty. I didn't think I would. But then the bonus was every single night of Ramadan, I was invited to break the fast with Fatima, my downstairs neighbour, my landlady, and her family. And that was very special to me, because every night, you were all waiting for 20 to 8. So about 7:30, they'd be yelling up, Alice, hurry up, come down. And we'd all go and sit round the table. And I'd always bring something as well, but we'd sit round the table and we'd be waiting. And then the fresh juice, little treats would come out, like the fresh juice and the lovely candied pastries called shabakia that you eat with the soup. So the first thing you eat is some dates, some milk, some soup, and these lovely pastries. And that just quenches your thirst immediately. And then you do drink water as well, of course, but you don't glug down a litre. And so every day I'd be sitting with the women downstairs, the men eat separately, and we would break the fast together. And for me, these mountains are so beautiful. Look at them. Look how wonderful they are. And spending that time with the community, actually spending Ramadan with them properly, fasting and then breaking the fast, meant that not only the mountains were beautiful, but also very much the community that I'm part of and the people that I live with. And I feel that they've taken me to their hearts, and I certainly have taken them to mine. Which brings me to the next part and the last part of my story. So come with me again. There's the mountains, a last view for you. I'm sorry, I feel bad taking them away from you. As we're walking through my house, I'm going to pose you a riddle, because the next part of my story is a journeying part. As an adventurer, I have to do adventures. And I've done recently 2 very big ones. I became the first woman to walk the length of the Draa River in Morocco, about 1,200 kilometres. And then this year, that was last year, and then this year I joined up the second part and walked the Sahara from Wetchabika down to the Mauritanian border, Guerguerat. And I walked with the same team of people. I walked with 3 Amazigh guides and 6 camels. And my camels all have Scottish names: Hector, Hamish, Hunter, Alistair, Callum and Sausage. And the men are called Brahim Halfi, Brahim Butchum, and when you're out in the middle of the nowhere, one of the things you do with each other is you tell stories, and particularly with the nomads, you tell riddles. So I'm going to ask you a riddle, and at the end, I'll see if you have the answer. So here we go. I know all the languages of the world, but I walk on my head. What am I? I know all the languages of the world, but I walk on my head. What am I? Now, I hope I don't forget to tell you the answer at the end. Think on it. My expeditions. So the first one, the Draa expedition, I conceived of it because it was a very easy geographical thing to do. It's a river. It starts somewhere, ends somewhere, and it starts at the Golden Dam in Ouarzazate, and it ends at the Atlantic Ocean. And you go through many, many, many different kinds of environments. We started in the mountains of drought, low power. We started in the mountains of drought. We went through the lush oases of the Draa Valley, which is Morocco's kind of date belt. That's where they grow all the dates. We went through the grand dunes of the Sahara, beautiful golden dunes, just like you imagine them, just like you see them in the pictures. And then we ended up in a flat wilderness, usually between 2 ridges of mountains, and that took us out to the ocean. So it was a journey of many different landscapes and many very beautiful landscapes, but also some severe ones. And it was one of those things. Before you do an expedition, you're always trying to sell it, because of course I have to get sponsors and I have to get press interest in order to be able to do these kind of things. So when I was writing my spiel, I was like, I'm Indiana Jones for girls, Indiana Jones for real. I'm going in search of lost cities. I will be battling snakes. I will be crossing the sands. Little did I think I would actually find a lost city. But here's what happened. We'd come to bivouac in a very, very small oasis. There was a group of about 6 palm trees. And we weren't very far from Fumshana, where there's some ancient rock carvings, which we were going to reach after the next day's walk. So that night we bivouacked. We were in the shelter of we were in a wadi, like a river valley between 2 large ridges. I'd say they were about 500 meters high. So kind of half of Snowdon, I guess, in height, very rocky and barren. And then you had this very pretty little oasis in the middle with just enough water to wash my clothes, which was great, and my feet and myself, which was a luxury. So I'd done all my chores, I'd washed my clothes, I'd washed myself, and it was getting towards dusk. And I thought, right, I'm going to walk up the ridge and see up to the ridge beside me and see if I can get some signal, because I haven't had mobile signal for 3 days and I want to call my mum. So I walked up to the ridge and it was a real scramble. It was proper like hands, on the rocks, and I hadn't got proper shoes on, but I had sandals on. I'm like clambering up these rocks and up all this shale, and everything's falling down below me, and I'm thinking, oh. I get to the top and the sun's quite low in the sky by this time. It's really about to set, and I'm sitting there WhatsApping my mum. Hello, Mum, how's it going? I've got 1 bar of signal. And I look up, and my eyes are kind of a little bit unfocused because I've been looking at my mobile like this. I look up, and I think, that looks like a building. It's a bit odd. Now, all during our journey, we'd come across nomadic encampments, and they're very obviously nomadic. There's round walls where you'd put a tent inside, or you might have a covering over it, and a place for the sheep. But this was quite clearly a building. It was 4 square, it had a door, and in fact, there was another one next to it. So I went up and had a closer look, and I thought, these are definitely buildings. And I couldn't see very much because the sun was really coming down by that point, but I could see there was enough to show me that there were buildings spread out in a kind of organised fashion. I thought, well, this is some kind of a town. I didn't know this was here. Anyway, so I went back down to the bottom. I said to the boys, do you know of a town up on the top, an old town? They went, no. And then the next day, Jean-Pierre, who is our expedition organiser and who's been working in that area for 40 years and knows everything there is to know, he'd come to meet us because he wanted to show me the 4,000-year-old rock carvings, which were just a few kilometres down the road towards Fumshana. So I said, Jean-Pierre, did you know there's a town on top of this hill? And he went, no, there isn't. I said, no, there is a town on top of this hill. Come and see with me. I'm sure there is. But because I'd only seen it in the dark, I didn't really know the extent of it. So anyway, so Jean-Pierre said, avec grand plaisir. He's very flamboyant Frenchman. So this time I put proper shoes on and we clambered up the hill again. Clamber, and got to the top. And we had full daylight and a fantastic view, and from there Jean-Pierre and I could see that this town or city stretched across 3 hillsides and quite clearly had streets. You could see the ruins of big buildings and smaller buildings. It was absolutely obvious that this wasn't just an encampment or some kind of very small thing. And Jean-Pierre said, Jean-Pierre, have you heard of this before? And he said, no, I haven't. This is the first time ever. I'd never seen anything like it. And we think we found a lost city because he's been working there for 40 years and there's been no sign of it. It's not marked on the map. And now all that remains for me to do is to go back and see if I can get an archaeologist to come and dig with me and see what we can find. But from speculation, we worked out, we think it must be connected to the rock paintings, which are further down the road. I mean, it makes no sense otherwise. And it must have been from that era, about 4,000 years ago, when there was much more vegetation in that area, and there were wild animals, and there was the ability for animals to live off the water and the grazing that there would be. It's also not that far from the Dra River, so that animals would have been able to graze and come back. The one thing for me was it was very inaccessible from the side we came up. There was no way you could get an animal up there or get a load up there. But actually on the other side of the hill, there was a much flatter slope, so you could assume that they would come up that. And we could see that there had obviously been some kind of fortification built. There was a wall around it. And again, in that time, that would have been a route for trade. So there must have been people up there. They must have had soldiers to guard them and to make sure that they could go about their daily life without any danger. So that was my finding a lost city. So my advice to everyone is, if you're near a mountain, go up and to WhatsApp your mum and you might find one. You learn a lot when you do adventures and you're out of your own environment and you're walking across the wilderness and you're walking with camels. You've got these animals with you. And one of the things I learned how to do was how to tar a camel's bottom. Now then, it may not sound like a hugely useful skill, but it is. Because when you get towards the warmer weather, so as we got towards the sea, there were more and more ticks. And as we all know, ticks are quite dangerous and they're really grim things. And these ones, once they'd been on the camels, they were about that size. They fed off so much blood. They got so fat. And they really bothered the camels. And it's not healthy for them to be covered in ticks. So what we did was we got this natural tar, which comes from the bark of a tree. And it smells just like tar. Very, very, very strong tar smell. Very strong indeed. So what you do, so this is my lesson for you, free of charge, my masterclass in how to tar a camel's bottom. You will need two people, I should say, for this task. You will need one at the front of the camel and one at the back of the camel. The one at the front of the camel, put a rope around your camel's mouth like a halter and put your one hand right next to the mouth and one hand down here. Then couch your camel, bring it down onto its four knees so it's sitting there calmly and peacefully. And if you're at the front of the camel, keep a firm hand on it and talk to it in a calm voice. Oh, Hamish, don't worry. Nothing bad is going to happen. Meanwhile, at the business end, at the back of the camel, the tar stings. This is what you need to know. It smells really strong and it stings on the skin, even for camels. So at the back of the camel, so you can imagine on your bottom. So at the back of the camel, first thing, where you put on your plastic bags as gloves and tie them here with twine. Get your big stick of tar or brush if you've got one. Then lift up the camel's tail gently and then very quickly tar its bottom. Because as you do that, the camel is going to jump up, try and kick you, and try to run away. And what you must remember about camels is they can kick. They're very flexible. So they can kick not only backwards, but they can kick sideways. So that is my top tip for you, how to tar a camel's bottom. And my third and final thing from my journeys is a little story that isn't mine, but is one that was told to me by Brahim Boudroum. We had long nights together in the mess tent. I've already mentioned the riddle and I haven't forgotten. I will be coming back to the answer. And in those times we would tell stories, tell jokes, tell riddles. And the stories were often traditional ones. So this is a traditional Moroccan story and many of you may know it, but if you don't, it's the story of the hedgehog and the eagle. Now, Al-Qanfud. Usually, Al-Qanfud, the hedgehog, is with the wolf, Al-Dib, and Al-Qanfud is the clever one, and the wolf, Al-Dib, is the stupid one. But as it happened, on this day, Al-Dib, the wolf, was on holiday, and the hedgehog, aware of his high intelligence, was just basking in the sunlight, enjoying himself, lying out like this, really stretching into it, having a sunbathe. And then as he was there like this, just enjoying himself, up came flying over him the shadow of the mighty eagle. And the mighty eagle circled and circled and circled and then landed gently beside him and went, Assalamu alaikum. And the qunfud said, Wa alaikum salam. And the eagle said, oh, clever, clever, clever hedgehog. How happy I am to have met you in this place. And the hedgehog said, well, thank you for this compliment, mighty eagle. That means a lot coming from you who are the king of birds. And the mighty eagle said, yes, he said, I am the king of birds, but I do not have knowledge like you do. You are the learned one amongst the animals. So the hedgehog's feeling pretty good. He's like, oh, I'm the learned one. I feel great about this. So the hedgehog, he's basking in his own glory, and he says, so Mr. Eagle, so King Eagle, how can I help you today? Because the eagle obviously has something on his mind. And the hedgehog wonders what it will be. Does he have to give him marriage advice? Is there maybe a dispute between the birds? Maybe the pigeons are arguing with the crows. And he's turning in his mind what he's going to be talking about. And the eagle says, oh, Mr. Hedgehog, I have a problem. There is a very delicious fruit that I wish to taste. I have never tasted it, but I know it's going to be the most succulent, marvelous fruit in the world. And the hedgehog said, oh, he said, well, what's the problem? You know, you eat all fruits. You can eat apples, you can eat oranges, you can eat figs, you can eat dates. What's the problem? And Mr. Eagle, King Eagle said, well, the problem, Mr. Hedgehog, is that this fruit has got a very hard, bristly outer coating, and it's very difficult to get into. I've tried it. I've kind of rolled it on the ground. I've pecked at it, but I can't get into it. It's got this tough outer layer, and I just cannot penetrate it, even with this beak and these talons. And the hedgehog said, nothing easier. Nothing easier. He said, this is what you do. So the eagle was all ears, if an eagle can be all ears. The eagle said, oh, what do I do? And the hedgehog said, well, take the fruit, fly up about 1 kilometer high, and then drop the fruit. The hard exterior will crack, and you'll be able to get inside. And the eagle, he said, Alhamdulillah, thanks be to God. Thank you, Mr. Hedgehog. And with those words, he picked up the hedgehog in his talons, climbed to 1 kilometer, dropped the hedgehog, cracked him open, and ate the delicious hedgehog fruit inside. The moral story is, you can be too clever. So that was my story. Thanks to Brahim Budkhun for that. And to end everything up, just before I pass around the hat, because there is a hat for donations, and I would really appreciate it if you would give something small, if you can afford it. That would be lovely, in traditional minstrel style, singing for my supper. But before we go there, do you remember the riddle? I know all the languages in the world, but I walk on my head. What am I? Did you get it? I am a pen. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you again soon.
People, wherever you are, thank you for listening to that last storyteller. What an amazing performance. And if you enjoyed it, the hat, look just below the story. If you're on the website, and I do encourage you to go to the website, and you can put a little in the hat. If you're in Texas, we've got a Texas hat. Got this in Kerrville. You could drop $1 in, or $2. If you're in England, you can drop £1 in, or more. If you're in Canada, well, you could drop a few dollars in. And maybe if you're right up north in Lapland, you could drop a few kroner in, or maybe €1 or 2. It will be much appreciated. Thank you. Don't forget the hat and enjoy the stories.